Good evening, everyone. It is Monday, January 16th, 7 o'clock. And I just want to welcome everyone in our council chambers to the standing committee and those joining us online as well. I'm going to read the land acknowledgement first. Blackfalds Town Council acknowledges that we are on Treaty 6 territory, a traditional meeting ground, gathering place, and traveling route to the Cree, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, Dene, and Nakota Sioux. We acknowledge all the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit whose footsteps have marked these lands for centuries. And the next item on our agenda is the adoption. Administration, did you have anything to add?
No, we don't, Deputy Mayor.
Council? Mayor Hoover?
I'm going to add an in-camera item under FOIP section 24.
Perfect. And does anybody else have anything? Councillor Stindy?
Two things. First, I was just hoping that we could get an update for the public on the Cody Dennis Wall Memorial. And then secondly, at the last council meeting, I had asked about an agenda item that the rec board had asked to come forward several months ago regarding the Abbey Centre vandalism for discussion for council. And I was advised that that was coming to this meeting at the last council meeting. So I was wondering if we could add that as an agenda item.
So Cody Dennis Memorial under information?
Please.
Okay. And then what's the other one?
It'll be the Abbey Centre vandalism for discussion.
Discussion.
Sure. Yeah, that'll work.
Okay. And can I have a motion, please? Councillor Coulter?
I move to accept the agenda as amended.
And all those in favor? That's carried unanimously.
All right. Point of proceeding, you might want to call to order. You haven't yet.
I did at the very beginning.
Did you? I didn't hear time. I'm sorry.
And now delegation 4.1 urban chickens, and we welcome Linda Miro up to the podium. And company. Hello.
Hi.
Who do you have with you tonight, Linda?
I have Tanya from Farmstead and Teresa who lives in Lacombe who has chickens as a license for hens.
Thank you. Whenever you're ready, we can get started.
Yeah, gosh, why does my heart almost pound when I do this? So, it's not a secret. I was before council in 2019, but tonight I know much more about chickens now, and I am requesting this again. And I brought some fellow people who know all about them. And yeah, so I would like the Urban Hen program, pilot program to start with, to try it. I'd like to piggyback Lacombe, Red Deer, Edmonton, Calgary, pretty much everybody who has hens. I did my research again just recently and found all the places that do have them. There was zero concerns from Bylaw. I talked to Bylaw in every jurisdiction from Edmonton to Calgary, around here, including Leduc, who didn't even know that they had chickens, and then we laughed about it because there's been no issues. Just basically the rundown of, they let you to have 4 to 6 hens, and I would like to produce my own food. I'd love to give my kids the opportunity to learn that. I feel like in a big city, if they can do that and there's no issues, then we can do it in little towns, and there's lots of surrounding little towns to prove that it's working. Everywhere, even, so some have only certain licenses, and Red Deer only has 100. They haven't expanded that. Lacombe is actually totally open, and I can't remember how many she said there are right now, but they don't even have a limit. Anybody who comes forward can have it. It's not a restriction of 10 families or whatever. I don't care. I don't think that there's a lot of people that want hens. I really don't. But I would like the opportunity on my property to be able to try to do that. Yeah. Anybody else want to add anything? This is, the professional.
Yeah, so my background is in urban chickens, like that's where my business specializes in. So we work with companies all the way from Canada to Florida. We specialize, our main area of expertise is in chickens. They're a really easy animal to keep. They're low disease risk. They're quiet. They don't require a lot of upkeep, maintenance. They are friendly. They get along with everything from cats, dogs to children. They don't wander. Chickens get out, they come back, they go home, they don't go far. So we've seen really great success with urban chicken keeping. It's really great community builders. Like you bring your neighbors in, your neighbors enjoy doing that, children really enjoy doing that. We have programs where we bring like hatching eggs and chicks and programs like that to schools. So there's a lot of educational opportunity with that as well. And it is something that has been piloted all over Canada and has been quite successful. We haven't actually seen any of those programs be removed because they weren't successful. The max we've ever seen is some caps or considerations. We did bring some bylaws and stuff, what we've seen like in Red Deer or Lacombe. So there's already some really great framework in place for that, but I would also be willing to volunteer our time specifically for, say, Northern Alberta when we're looking at bylaws. If we're looking at a bylaw of BC, might not work for here because we have different like weather restrictions, right? We have different considerations we want to make sure these animals are comfortable and in a safe situation when it comes to backyard keeping. And that's again where we specialize. So we'd be happy to come in and help develop that program to make sure it really suits our area and the people that would be using that program.
Well, they're good garbage disposal too. I actually have a friend, her son comes over and uses my chickens as therapy. It's awesome for the kids. And like she said, my dog hangs out with the chickens. They get along just fine. We haven't had a noise complaint. I actually love them. They're more like pets than anything.
They really do become a pet and part of the
They
family
are.
for most people that own them. Is there any questions we can answer for anybody?
Yeah, I'll open the floor for questions. Mayor Hooper?
Thank you. So I've only been a resident of Blackfalds for about 10 years, but I'm sure that others that have been here longer were aware that there used to be a chicken farm here. So I did speak to a couple of longer term residents in Blackfalds that whether it's correct or not would have a concern with odor. So what would you say to residents that would have that type of concern that someone with urban chickens might create an odor problem for their neighbors?
Yeah, absolutely. So just like with our dogs, there is some upkeep, right? So odor could be a concern. When it comes to odor in birds, what we're looking at is insufficient bedding. A lot of the times and improper care, which the bylaws would address. And again, that's not usually a main concern. There are different systems you can use for keeping hens. We have a deep litter system. So we use deep bedding that naturally composts in the coop. Our coops are cleaned our coops with the deep litter system can be cleaned every 12 to 16 months with zero odor concerns. So it's not a lot of maintenance. Like there is care that needs to happen. You also have other systems where you can just say clean out less bedding weekly and just change it out. Or there's people that have used like a poop board or like a kitty litter system. So you can have a system with some sort of like diatomaceous earth and clay. So like stall dry, these products are readily available around Alberta. You can kitty litter scoop that and eliminate those concerns. Chicken waste composts quite nicely. So when you take it out and you're going to compost it or use it, it's amazing fertilizer and it composts really quickly. So you don't have the odor concerns. When you were saying you were talking to residents that there was a commercial barn, I'm guessing?
Correct.
Yeah. So when we're looking at commercial barns, we work with commercial barns as well. So we work with clients between our smallest big commercial client would probably be about 5,000 birds up to say 20,000 birds. Those aren't big commercial barns. When you're dealing with odor in those situations, they actually put down very little bedding. You have a lot of dust as well because chickens can be dusty. And you have such a concentration in a small area. So when we're looking at a chicken in a backyard, in a commercial setting, a lot of the times they have if they're in pens and cages, you'll have 4 or 5 birds in a cage about this big, living together. And when you have a free range system, they have less than 1 square foot per bird in a barn like that. So it's quite concentrated. A lot of the recommendations in these urbans is that we're looking for at least 3 square feet of interior space and upwards of 10 square feet of exterior space. So even birds living in those conditions, the odor is distributed because they have space to move and the systems naturally work. It's like having cats or dogs or anything else we keep in our backyard. Our dogs go washroom back there, but my yard's not a disgusting, stinky mess because I don't have 30 dogs in my backyard. I have 2 big dogs, but I have 2 dogs, right? And so it's a similar kind of layout when we're looking at that in an urban chicken program. Odor wouldn't be a concern unless there was improper care. But what we're finding is people that are applying for these programs and want to do that are taking the programs, and I'd be happy to help write a program. We can have a course that they have to complete before, right? So they have those experiences. This is what my business does, is supporting people getting into this. It's kind of intimidating and scary, but it's very easy if you have a couple of the right tools and a little bit of guidance. And so when people get into that, if they know how to handle it, we've seen really great success that they make those decisions. They're not neglecting their animals. The only time I'd say odor would be a concern is if there was neglect. But we've never seen that in any of the programs thus far.
And like she said, 4 or 6 hens compared to a
Yeah.
big
Thousands.
shop of them.
Yeah.
It's a huge difference, right? Yeah.
And that's why those bylaws are in place. We want to make sure those birds have adequate space. That's important for odor, health, mental health, their care and well-being as well, right?
What about you? I've done lots of research on what we should actually use and, better hemp shavings opposed to, but you did use straw. didn't you?
I'm using straw, yeah.
Yeah, and I would think that would be more stinky.
Well, it's winter too, right? And I'm anal in the summertime and I'm cleaning every week, so.
Yeah. But the winter is different.
Yeah, they say to keep it longer because it
What do you
keeps
do?
them
Just put
warmer.
it on top?
Yeah, well, I clean out some
Yeah.
and then put one on top
Yeah.
because it's gross, but
But it hasn't been a problem even with not expensive hemp.
no, I haven't noticed any smell at all.
Well, and with that system, so when you have your nitrogen, which is the animals going washroom, and chickens don't pee and poo, they do it all at once, so it's a high moisture. And then you have the carbon, which is the dry concept that we're adding, which is either pine, hemp shavings, straw. What she's doing is removing some and then adding more straw, and that creates that deep litter system, so you have the carbon and nitrogen ratios. And just like when we're composting in our backyard, we get those ratios correct, it works really well, you don't have any odors, you don't have moisture issues, and it's very effective with less maintenance. We're not having to do chores every day with these animals.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any? Councilor Stendy?
I do, but through the chair for administration. I noticed in here, it speaks to having a trained municipal representative to do coop inspections. And I'm just curious if we see this come forward to council for consideration, if we could see a cost benefit analysis on what that will look like for our staff and whether or not we have the capacity in our budget, because I know that this year and next year are probably pretty tight. So I would just like to see at the end of the day what that would cost us if we were to consider implementing this program.
It's just about,
The bylaw officer comes to just quickly look at the coop.
just like your dog or your cat, right?
Yeah.
Last time I came before you guys, and there are some same people, some different, but I got asked what do you do with your chickens in the winter? Do you wrap them? And I didn't get to answer to that, but that just seemed like pardon. And they might be in the back of the police car because someone's not taking care of them. That's not it either. And actually, I don't know how you bought your chickens, but I know people have bought chickens and they actually took a cardboard box on them, or they can be in a cat crate, right?
Yeah.
And really, people that are applying, when I phoned the bylaws, they said there's absolutely no concern with people who have the chicken license because they've applied for it. They're taking the time. And not everybody wants chickens, like I said. So they're not, the only problem that they ever did see is one time, one of the people told me that there was a night rooster by accident, or people that don't have a license and they just don't care and they're just doing it because they want to and don't even know they need to have a license. So people that are investing, it's not free to get chicken eggs. You know, you gotta buy your chicken, you gotta feed them, you gotta clean it. They're not doing it to just have these chickens and not take care of them. You know, these are like your pets really and your source of food. So you are taking care of them. And there's been no chickens riding in the back of police cars. They haven't even had to actually pick up any chickens ever. So,
But it is the bylaw officer, and they do a check once a year. So they come out, they inspect your coop, you have to have everything in place with your chickens. And then they come, they do an inspection, they leave, she was there maybe 5 minutes, and then that's it. And then they'll come this year, just to make sure that everything's clean and
taking care of them.
taken care of, yeah. So.
Does anybody else have any questions? Well, thanks so much for coming out tonight.
If you guys want this, it's just more information. It's locally.
I think it was put on our agenda for this evening, so
Okay.
there's lots of information.
Okay, cool. Thank you
Yeah.
very much. Okay,
Thanks, guys. And our next delegation, 4.2, property assessment process, and we welcome Frank Watson to the podium.
Good evening. It's been a long time since I've made a presentation to council due to COVID and everything like that. So this is my first in-person meeting, so if my presentation skills are lacking, I apologize. So my name is Frank Watson. I'm your assessor, property assessor. It's my job to prepare an assessment on all property in the town of Blackfalds for property taxation purposes. A little bit of background. Prior to 1995, the provincial government provided an assessment. There was an assessment branch of municipal affairs, and we provided assessments to small towns, villages, smaller cities in Alberta that did not employ their own assessors. Cities of like Red Deer, Medicine Hat, Edmonton, Calgary, and the larger counties along the Highway 2 employed their own assessors. So the provincial government provided at a greatly subsidized rate the assessment function to towns and villages in Alberta. In 1995, part of the Premier Klein austerity program was to privatize the assessment function along with a lot of the other functions and to download that onto the municipality. So the municipality went through a competitive process where they asked for people to put in their bids to be the assessor. And I've been your assessor since 1996, so I've been here a while. So what's the assessment process? So the assessments in Alberta are based on a legislative standard and is found under the Municipal Government Act and the regulations that are made under the Act. So what I have to do is legislate it, it's mandated, and I have no choice but to follow those guidelines. So what basically the legislation says is that assessments are prepared every year as of July 1st for taxation the following year. So what that means that in 2022, the taxes were based on a valuation of July 1st, 2021. Going into 2023 this year, taxes will be based on July 1st, 2022. So we will get into that in a minute, but the way that the assessments are based on what they call mass appraisal. And that means we have to value all properties using standard methods. So we have to, usually it's a land and building value, where we value the land based on the size of the lot, the zoning of the lot, and the location. Typically, in town, land ranges from, say, $80,000 for a duplex lot to about $130,000, $140,000 to the, some of the best lots in town with views backing onto parks, those type of things. The building assessment is based on a quality, and assessors use a manual that was published by the provincial government. So in Blackfalds, the same assessment manual is used here as in County of Lacombe, City of Lacombe, City of Red Deer. So it's a standardized manual that we use, and the manual is based on a quality rating from 1 to 9, 1 being the poorest, 9 being the best. Average or typical is a quality 4. That would describe a 3-bedroom, bath and a half bi-level with construction grade materials used. And, they were built, they were almost cookie cutter type of houses. And this goes back, 20 years or so. They would, put them up really, really fast. A quality 5 is a move-up house that has better quality of fixtures, some upgrades. A quality 6 is a custom built. And a quality 7 is a good custom built. So those are the value ranges, and we set up benchmarks. Say, okay, this is a 4, this is a 5, this is a 6. So through our experience, that's what we do. So the legislation found in the Municipal Government Act and the regulations is that each municipality must prepare annually, every year, an assessment for all properties in the municipality. The assessments must reflect the physical condition of the property as of December 31st. So houses that are under construction, if they're, say, framed, we use a percentage of the house that's based on a percent complete. And then we would, so that would be as of December 31st, and then we would do a supplementary assessment on those houses once they are finished. So the supplementary assessment would be based on when they took possession of the house, and it would be prorated from that time to the end of the year. The legislation also says that the assessments must be based on market value as of July 1st for taxation the following year. And as I said, taxes levied in 2023 will be based on July 1st, 2022 sales price. And market value is defined as the most probable selling price. So not all properties in town sell, but through, you say, well, this 1,100 square foot house is similar to this 1,100 square foot house, and this 3,000 square foot house is similar to that 3,000 square foot house. So that's what we do. We use mass appraisal techniques to establish a estimation of market value. When an appraiser comes to your house to do an appraisal for financing or whatever, that's called a single property appraisal, where they just look at your house and compare it to 3 other houses that have sold. Assessment is like that, but different. So because we do not do an in-depth analysis of every house, we have to assess all 3,000 houses every year. So it's not physically possible to inspect every house every year. It could be done, but time and money is what it takes. So using these tools that we have, we go out and we collect the data, say, okay, this house is a quality 4, quality 5. We then put that information into our assessment computer, and it gives us a number that we then turn over to the town in February so they can send out their notices in May. The regulated standard, this is the standard that is set by the government. Regulated standard is all assessments must be within 5% plus or minus of sales prices. So if properties are selling for $500,000, the assessments have to be within plus or minus 5% of $500,000. How do we get that? So we look at the houses that have sold, and we look at the assessment on that property. So we take the assessment, divide it by the sales price to get what's called an assessment to sales ratio, or an ASR. And the provincial government says, through their audit process, that that standard has to be met. If that standard is not met, the auditors do not pass the assessment and have the authority to quash the assessment and say everything has to be redone. So that standard is there and it has to be met. Speaking of the assessment audit, there is a branch of Alberta Municipal Affairs that provides an assessment audit to ensure that the standard in Alberta is met. And the reason for that is that all properties in Alberta share in the cost of education. So if a municipality is under assessing property for education purposes, they are not contributing enough to the province for education purposes. So that's what the auditors look at, is to ensure that the standard is met. So what happens is we prepare the assessments every year in January, February. We then report those assessments to the audit branch through what's called MileNet. And the auditors do a stage 1 audit where they look at all of the sales in the town and divide them by the assessment to ensure that the standard is met. Now, there are going to be some outliers. There are going to be some properties that maybe the ratio is at 80% and maybe some are at 110. But the average must be 95 to 105. Typically, we try to hit a mark of about 98%. So what that means is that the assessments should be at 90% of sales prices. The next level, excuse me, that the auditors do is what's called a stage 2, and that's a detailed audit. So they come out to the municipality, they talk to the administration, and look at the bylaws that are in place for the assessor. Then they go out and they look at the work that is being done in the field, and they do a written report that is forwarded to administration for their review. So in 2020, the provincial government did a detailed audit on the assessments. It was based on 2020 and 2019 sales prices. So at that time, we were in the middle of COVID. Properties weren't selling very much. And so what they did is they looked at the history leading up to that. And at that time, prices were depressed. We had gone through oil prices in 1917, 18, 19 that affected property values in town. And prices were depressed. Prices, in looking back to 2014, I mean, there was hundreds of houses being built. And market value was strong and sales prices. Once the oil prices started to fall, so did prices in Blackfalds, especially on the upper end houses. The 1,000 square foot bi-levels were still selling for $280, $290. The upper end houses were probably 375 to 400. So there was a ceiling there in 2020 that the auditor said, okay. But looking forward, so in 2021, we could see prices, especially on the move-up homes, were moving up faster than the standard houses. So what the auditor said was, in our opinion, the town of Blackfalds is preparing assessments for 2020 taxation year to meet the majority of legislative standards. Most aspects of the assessor's procedures and practices used to prepare the assessment meet the best standard practice. However, when we were looking at it, there was definitely the assessments on the larger homes were falling below the standard for the last 2 years. So the auditor suggested or told me that I had to review the better quality houses. Now, those are houses that are typically 1,500 square feet or better and are of the move up. The modified bi-levels is probably a good example of what I'm talking about, where you have a 1,200 square foot modified bi-level, but it's better than in design and finish than the 1,200 square foot bi-level beside it. So those are the type of properties that the auditor zeroed in and said, you've got to look at these all. So 2021, we were still in COVID. We did not have the opportunity to go out and review the properties, but in the summer of 2022, all of the move-up houses, the better quality houses, were reviewed. What I found was that the assessments on those houses were at about 20 or about 80% of their sales prices, which means that they were underassessed by about 20 to 30%. So going forward into this year, we're doing a reassessment on all those houses. So a house that was maybe $380,000 3 years ago is now $500,000. And that's pretty typical as of July 1st, 2022. So that is what we have to focus on, knowing that things are different in the world right now than they were July of 2022. However, my authority stops at July 1st. I cannot look forward any more than, because it's what's called post facto, it's after the fact. So we have to, and the auditor says, you have to look at this, these houses and bring them up to standards. So what's going to happen is the houses that were assessed, as I said, at maybe 400 and now 450. And there are some houses that are in town that are selling at $600,000 to $700,000. Those houses may have been assessed in the high fours. So it's going to be a significant increase to those houses. Now I want to talk a little bit about the appeal process. So once the assessments are prepared and given to the municipality sends out every year an assessment tax notice to all property owners. And the owner has 60 days to review the assessment, hopefully talk to me, and make an appeal if they feel that their assessment is too high. It can't just be, well, my taxes went up by $1,500, so I'm going to put in an appeal. Yes, you cannot appeal taxes. The only thing you can appeal is the assessment. And when we go forward to an appeal, the board makes their decision based on evidence. So what is the selling prices of these type of houses, and is your house similar to the houses that sold that the assessor is comparing it to? The town of Blackfalds is a member of the Central Alberta Assessment Review Board. And it's a independent body that hears appeals on assessments throughout Central Alberta. So they contract to towns, and that's their sole function, is to hear assessment appeals. And that generally occurs during August, September, October. Legislation says they have to have all of their appeals heard before the end of the year. So they look at the amount of appeals they have, and they may have to hire more people. It's set up through the city of Red Deer. The city of Red Deer administers this and charges back to the town a fee for that service. As I said, the board makes their decision based on evidence, not just my taxes went up, my assessments went up. Okay, why is it wrong? So the first level is talk to me. I will be able to supply you with all the sales in town. I mean, I have them all broken down by street address for the last 2 years. So there's hundreds. There's more than 10 sales in town. So it is, and that's what we found, that there has been a significant increase and maybe pent up demand in 2021. But there was definitely there's not just Blackfalds, it's, a lot of municipalities are seeing that this year, that over the last 2 years that there's been definitely a peak. So you can appeal your assessment to this board. That is the only level of appeal. If you're not satisfied with the Central Alberta Assessment Review Board decision, the only thing you can appeal to the Court of King's Bench would be error in law. Did the board err in law? You cannot appeal the decision of, the assessment is confirmed. You can only appeal it as if the board erred in looking at legislation. So in a nutshell, that's my job. And please, if you have any questions, I would try and answer them.
Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Powell?
Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. We did have a couple of questions that actually came up at a recent economic development meeting, so I'd like to ask those. So the question that was asked was, when permits are issued by the town for renovations, basement finishing, hot tubs, sheds, accessory buildings, etc. Excuse me. Are those homes individually reviewed by yourself, or how do those affect?
So planning department gives me all the permits. We focus on new houses. Basement development, I talk to the building inspector because we don't go and tramp through houses to look at basement finish. The reason being is that, it's below grade finish, probably does not meet, the standards of say, the upstairs finish, but it does add value. So we take what is provided to us on the permit. We look at the permit, we look at the house, and then we talk to the building inspector. Have you given final occupancy, yes or no? And if it's yes, then we add, basement finish adds about $20,000 to the assessment, as does a garage. So we can physically see the garage. Basement finish, not so much, because nobody's home, and we sure as heck ain't gonna go start looking through windows.
Fair enough, absolutely. So thank you, because that does answer my question. They were wondering whether or not when someone gets a permit, if
Yes.
that is.
Yeah, things like hot tubs and those type of things are not necessarily assessed because they could be considered to be personal property that you could take them with you.
Right.
So hot tubs do not form part of the assessment. Decks, yes, but not the hot tubs.
I have a subsequent question, if I could. Okay, great. And then the other question they asked was, what about new facilities being put in their community? So a school or a municipal building, etc.
Well, certainly those type of things make the community better to live in. If you don't have a high school, you're not going to find people that want to move to your community.
You know it.
But, you know,
For the last 10 years, we've disagreed.
you know, with the high schools here, certainly it becomes more appealing. You know, you don't, if you don't want to live in Red Deer, if you don't want to live in Lacombe, certainly Blackfalds has the amenities of a small town that the city has, just smaller. So yes, those amenities, the pools, the skating rinks, the BMX track, all of those things are appealing to young families. Not so much myself, but yes, you know, and that's what we are finding in Blackfalds is that young families are moving here because of that quality of life.
Right, so, but does that affect any of the values for the particular like communities or areas where those buildings are?
Not necessarily, no.
And
Let
then,
me just rephrase that. Maybe if you're located next to the high school, somebody would pay a premium to buy that house, but it's not thousands of dollars. It just sells easier and faster.
and then I have one more. So as you mentioned here in your presentation, it seems like we're looking at a increase in home values in this next taxation cycle. So how does that affect, and this might be a better question to administration, how will that affect our overall mill rates?
May I? It won't.
Okay.
You know, because your mill rate is based on the amount of money you need to operate it for a year and what the school or what the provincial government is charging you for education. What's going to happen is that, let's say that on average, we're going to throw in the numbers, let's say that on average, the assessments increase on average 15%. What that means is that in a revenue neutral situation, if your assessment is up 15% and the budget has stayed the same, taxes will stay the same at 15%. Anything above will see a tax increase, anything below will see a tax decrease. So depending on your relative increase in the big pie, some properties will probably see an increase in taxes this year because they're going to be higher than average. But it does not affect your budget.
Okay.
It's just the money is distributed differently. The lower, the $300,000 houses might see a decrease. The $700,000 houses will see an increase.
Okay. I'm gonna take a minute and formulate my question. Someone else will. Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments? Not seeing any. Very good, Councilor.
Please, my contact information is here. If you have any questions, please phone me or you can get my email through the town and be more than happy to provide you with more information if you need it, please.
For sure. So then, sorry. So when we're looking at quality houses 5, 6, and 7, which I believe were the ones that you said might be seeing an increase, what percentage approximately of home in Blackfalds are that quality?
Good question. I would say somewhere around 20 to 25%.
Okay.
We saw a very, very steep increase in those properties starting in 2021 and continuing on into 2022. Very strong.
And then, thank you, because that made a big difference to my mill rate question. So I thought that number was going to be higher. And then my last question is, you discussed if people have concerns about their assessment that they can reach out to you. So that's for people who feel that their assessment is either A too high or B too low.
Correct.
Correct.
And you know, I don't want it to be a confrontation. I mean, it is an emotional, I mean, I've been in this business too long. it is an emotional issue when people receive their tax notice and seeing their taxes have gone up $1,500, $2,000. Very emotional. And so it becomes almost a confrontation of them versus me. You know, you're stupid, you're wrong, you know, you don't know what you're talking about, all those type of names. If we could talk in a, maybe what, and I've talked to administration about this, is maybe once the assessments are prepared and the notices are mailed out, we could have an open house where people could come in and, you know, even if we want to do a town hall type of meeting. I have no problem with that. I think people have to, my job is to try and educate.
Thank you very much.
Did anybody else have any other questions or comments? Well, I think you did a really great job. I think a lot of people that didn't get to see this online now will be able to go back and actually have a reference of why we assess the way we do. And I think that you did a wonderful job. So I just thank you.
And what I like people to do is look at their last year's assessment. Look at it and say, 386, would I sell my, no, I wouldn't. Have a look at your assessment. If it's reasonable, then it's probably not going to change. If you know, I mean, I wouldn't sell it for 386, then yeah, that assessment is going to go up.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I
Thanks a
appreciate
lot.
it. We have no public hearing and no business arising from the minutes. So our first order of business is 7.1, request for direction bylaw 1276.23, amending land use bylaw redistricting of a portion of lot 3, block 1, plan 1022233. This was a lot, thanks.
Good evening, council. The planning and development section is currently processing a subdivision application along South Street. It pertains to 2 parcels. One is a vacant parcel that we currently have listed for sale, and the next door parcel is protective services. And what's happening is we're subdividing approximately 2.54 hectares off the vacant parcel, and then consolidating that, it equates to a 25-meter strip. And then subdividing off that 25-meter strip and consolidating into the protective services parcel to accommodate for future expansion. These 2 parcels are currently designated different districts under the land use bylaw. So this amendment before you right now is just to redistrict that strip that we're subdividing from the current highway commercial to the public facility to accommodate that consolidation. So the administrative recommendation is that the Standing Committee of Council recommend Council give first reading to bylaw 1276.23. And I just want to make a slight amendment to the second administrative recommendation. That is that the Steering Committee of Council recommend Council upon giving first reading to bylaw 1276.23, that Council sets a public hearing date for February 28th, 2023 at 7 p.m., not 7:30 p.m. in Council chambers. Can I answer any questions you may have?
Councillor Sandy?
I only have one. Are we sure, before moving forward, that this is enough land for an expansion? Or are we going to be having to have this discussion again in the future?
Through the chair.
Thank you, Chair, to Councilor Sandy. Yeah, we have had the discussion with the RCMP and the Federal Protective Services to determine that would give us enough for the future.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
That was my exact question.
Anybody else have any questions or comments to add? If not, we do have a motion on the floor and can entertain whatever you guys want. Councillor Sandy?
I'm prepared to move that Standing Committee of Council recommend Council give first reading to bylaw 1276.23.
Any debate on that motion? Not seeing any. All those in favor? And that's carried unanimously. And we also have a second administrative recommendation. Mayor Hoover?
I'll move that Standing Committee of Council recommend Council upon giving first reading to bylaw 1276.23 that Council sets a public hearing date for February 28th, 2023 at 7 p.m. in Council chambers.
Counselor Pell.
Thank you. Just before we vote on the motion, could I ask that when this comes forward to the regular council meeting, that the map be included in the agenda package?
Yes, my apologies for that mix-up.
Any debate on the motion? And all those in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. And moving on to 7.2, request for direction, policy 164.23, aquatic center closure policy. And we welcome Manager Simpson.
Good evening. So I bring before you tonight in an effort to provide consistent service delivery to our community and our visiting guests, a draft of a new aquatic center closure policy. It is felt now is a beneficial time to compile existing closure parameters that already exist within our aquatic safety plan and to further develop a full robust policy that encompasses all of the potential occurrences that might happen in our outdoor aquatic environment. These occurrences could potentially and do impact our ability to serve the public in a safe manner. The activation of the aquatic center closure policy will also support the Town of Blackfalds Health and Safety Policy Statement per the Town of Blackfalds Occupational Health and Safety Manual by having clear guidelines set out and to help protect worker safety. The intent of introducing this draft policy at this time is so the Standing Committee of Council may discuss and provide feedback so the process may move forward towards completion for the 2023 pool season, which is scheduled to start May 19th, 2023, of course, weather dependent. That is the target date of the new pool's opening date. So I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Does anybody have any questions? All right, if nobody has any questions, we have an administrative recommendation. Counselor Sands.
I'll move that the Standing Committee of Council recommend that the aquatic center closure policy be brought forward to Council for consideration.
And any debate on the motion? And all those in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you. And we're moving on to 7.3, request for direction, policy 165.23, the Abbey Center acceptable usage policy. Manager Simpson.
So I also bring forward to you tonight amendments to the existing Abbey Center acceptance usage policy. Updating this policy to our current best practices would help align the policy, and it would help give clear and concise direction to all of our guest services booking staff, while staying true to our intended purpose. It is felt that with the turn of a new year, now is an opportune time to review the policy and incorporate some of our observations and feedback that we have gathered over the course of the last 8 years of operations. Highlights of the changes that have been made include, but are not limited to, clarification around liquor being on premises, increasing the maximum of regional, provincial, national, and international events from 4 to 6, the deletion of the requirement of the minimum of 6 of the 12 allowable events needing to be sporting events or competitions, the addition of the indoor play space, addition of the amphitheater, and the updating around the outdoor aquatic center. So at this time, administration is just requesting that the Standing Committee of Council discuss and provide feedback around the recommended changes.
Does anybody have any questions? Comments? We're doing really well. We have a couple of administrative recommendations. Anybody want to entertain a motion? Counselor Pell?
Absolutely. I move Standing Committee of Council moves to accept the provided amendments to the Abbey Center acceptable usage policy.
And any debate on that motion? All those in favor? That's carried unanimously. And then we have a second administrative recommendation. Counselor Sands.
I'll move that the Standing Committee of Council recommend the inclusion of the amended acceptable usage policy on the January 24th, 2023 regular council meeting agenda for review.
And any debate on that motion? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Another one carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you. And 7.4, request for direction, policy 167.23, electronic sign policy, and welcome Director Krakovich.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council. As you guys know, we have the 2 electronic signs in town. We have the one sign that's on Broadway, which is primarily a text sign. And we just got our highway 2A sign up and running again, and that has more graphic capabilities. So we're looking at using that more to advertise for local businesses, local groups and organizations. So just some information, the highway daily traffic count was 11,130 vehicles in 2021. So we feel that that's pretty good advertising bang for your buck for a lot of our businesses and groups. We researched some other municipalities to see, what the pricing is for similar type scenarios. And below we have the town of Penhold, we have Lacombe District Chamber of Commerce, Grand Prairie District Chamber of Commerce. And you can see the prices are varying. And way down below in our document, we actually have the form. It's down below the policy. But there we have our rates that we are suggesting, which we based basically on what we thought was reasonable for our community. So for nonprofit, we have $15 per week, local sports teams, $30 per week, local businesses, $50 per week, and regional businesses, $60 per week. So going back up to our document here. The goal is to rescind the old policy that we had and replace it with this new policy. And we would make that effective immediately. We did talk with the Bulldogs. We have made an arrangement with them. We are going to advertise their games for free, just because we did have that discussion with them. But other than that, we'd be looking to charge organizations after this point. So with that, if you guys have any questions about the policy or anything else.
Anybody have any questions, Councillor Standy?
First, a comment. Thank you for this. I very much appreciate it, and I appreciate that the rates were kept reasonable, especially for our nonprofits. And then secondly, through the chair to administration, does this need to be 2 recommendations for council if we're also rescinding the other?
That would automatically take place.
Okay, perfect.
Councillor Powell?
Thank you. So under section in the policy 3.7, that says the signboards will not be utilized for the following items. I feel that there might be a few things that are missing from this list. So I went and referenced our current advertising and sponsorship bylaw, number 121/16, which reads, the town will not solicit or accept advertising or sponsorship from companies whose reputation could prove detrimental to the town's public image and or whose main business is derived from, and then it lists the sale of tobacco, pornography, political endorsements, which was already in there, but I think the wording in the sign policy is better. It says it represents political endorsement of a party, elected representative, or candidate from any level of government. It also goes on to discuss items that present demeaning or derogatory portrayals of individuals or groups that contain anything which, in light of generally prevailing community standards, is likely to cause deep or widespread offense. And then it also goes on to discuss alcohol-related advertising and promotions and about how they must abide by the ALGC guidelines. And since that was written in 2016 and we know that cannabis was not legalized at that point, I'm guessing that the cannabis legislation will also have to fit under the ALGC. So I just thought, since we have those items in an existing policy, they should probably also come into play in this. I don't know what everyone else on council's thoughts are. Those are
Does anybody else have any questions or comments? I do have a comment. I am not in favor of charging nonprofit organizations. I think Penfold has a great idea there. I believe our sports teams and our nonprofits shouldn't have to pay. And I think with sports teams especially, it's attracting tourists to our community to watch games. So I'm not in favor of having a cost with that. I don't know what everybody else's thoughts are. Counselor Simons,
I'm gonna agree with you 100%.
Counselor Standing,
So in regards to that, if we were not to charge our nonprofits or our sports teams, knowing that there is a limit to how many advertisements we could do, if that's something that this council wanted to consider, would we not also have to write in this policy some guidelines surrounding how often you are allowed to advertise as a nonprofit? Or because otherwise we could very much have one or two nonprofits year-round, 24/7, because otherwise the policy states it's first come, first serve. Like that's the words that are used currently. So if we're considering not charging them, we may need to look at larger changes to this policy before moving it forward.
Counselor Powell.
Thank you. So a comment on that. I knowing the staff time that has to go into it to ensure that A, the scheduling, and B, the graphics are done and put up, and everyone has so much time because there's limits and whatever. It's quite a bit of staff time that goes into doing that. So I would definitely support a nominal fee, maybe if it was reduced to say $5 a week. But I'd be wary of giving it away for free because, as mentioned, we do have a lot of groups and we still have to pay our staff.
Through to administration, I'm just wondering, in the past, because I know that we have had nonprofits advertise on there for free before, has there been an abundance?
I don't believe we've advertised to outside agencies on our.
I can't remember.
Counselor Standing.
So through the chair to administration, currently what is our standing when it comes to advertising local nonprofits or sports, for example, in our annual guide that comes out? Because I imagine we do charge for that. We don't give it away for free, right?
That's correct. Yes, there is a rate for that.
And then I guess too, my other question would be, because I'm pretty sure we've had schools registration advertised on there, would they fall under a nonprofit or business as well?
They'd be nonprofit.
Nonprofit.
Yeah.
Counselor Dennis.
I know that we have advertised Cody's Memorial being on there in the past. And there was no charge.
Counselor Coulter.
Just, I know that some nonprofits before they'd get an option to advertise on the sign at Broadway for free, but they had to pay for the one down at the BMI. Just the difference in, this one's more of just a straight wording sign where that one's more of a graphic sign.
Is any Counselor Standing?
I'm actually really glad that Councillor Coulter brought that up. Would that be something that maybe we could look at adding into the policy instead of changing what it currently is? So that way they're still offered a free option with the downtown sign, or they can choose to pay for the one at the BLI.
Yeah, we did talk about that with our marketing group, and they were, they believe that we should keep the messaging for the town messages just on that board over there, on the Broadway one. And they weren't considering the other nonprofit organizations, but we can always revisit that and talk with administration. Consider that.
Counselor Coulter.
In regards to that, just sort of my point of view in regards to being able to, companies, businesses, town, nonprofits, being able to have the option to use both signs, because not everybody comes in off of Highway 2.
Just with that other sign, the one on Broadway, the graphics are very limited and the text is very limited. So those are the things that are, that kind of make it not attractive to advertise on that sign. So something to consider.
Councillor Pell, thank you. And the groups that would be looking for the free advertising would have to be made aware, like, obviously there's a character limit, so they have to just be made aware of that, but then at least they have a choice.
Anybody else have questions or comments? Mayor Hoover?
Yeah, I do understand that there's room to have an opportunity for maybe limited number of free nonprofit, but I think in general, considering what billboard advertising costs for anyone, they don't give that away for free. This is quite a bargain. I think most billboards are in the thousands per month. I think that there's room for a little bit of refinement in here in terms of adding some, maybe a 1 day a week or a limited number that are available to those nonprofits that maybe don't have a lot of need or activity. But I don't think this should be for free. As was mentioned, there's time that goes in for our staff, and as Councillor Stenny mentioned, there will be some that will take full advantage of free time on there and probably dominate it. So it may be that there's room to change this a little bit to allow for a limited amount of free, but I still think there should be at least a nominal charge.
Anybody else have any questions or comments? If not, do you have an administrative recommendation, or anybody feel free to make a motion for something? Mayor Hoover?
Yes, and given that there's no clear consensus, I make a motion to refer this back to administration.
Any discussion? Councillor Stanley?
Does administration feel that they've heard enough tonight to be able to bring this with changes to council?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, so that said, are you willing to rescind your motion so that I can proceed with the motion ahead of us?
Well, let's see, if it fails, then for sure there's
Okay.
room for that.
Any more debate on this motion? All those in favor? And all those opposed? Okay. Councillor Stanley?
So I'm prepared to move that the Standing Committee of Council recommend that the electronic sign policy be brought forward to council for review and consideration.
Now, will that be with minor changes?
Yes, with minor changes at administration's discretion.
Any debate on that motion? Councillor Coulter?
I just want to just clarify that all the suggestions that Councillor Pell had brought up and other councillors have discussed will be considered to go into this policy, right? So those are all noted. I just want clarification on that. Thank you.
Yes.
Any other debate on the motion? Not seeing any. All those in favor? That's carried unanimously. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, and then we are at 7.5, request for direction, policy 168.23, compliance certificate policy and procedural draft. Welcome back, manager.
Thank you, council. A very common requirement in any land transaction is a request for a certificate of compliance, and that is to confirm that the buildings meet the setbacks prescribed in the land use bylaw. This is not a mandatory requirement, so there really is no provincial regulations or guidelines that guide municipal staff in determining how to issue these. So to ensure some transparency and consistent processing of these requests for certificates of compliance, the Planning and Development Department has prepared the attached certificate of compliance policies and procedures to assist with that. These policies and procedures have been developed through researching municipal best practices and integrating some current town practices, and will serve to provide guidance and for staff and the public on several fronts here. One is when a property is fully complies with setbacks prescribed in the current land use bylaw, that's when we would issue a certificate of compliance. When a property has not been developed in accordance with setbacks prescribed by the current land use bylaw or has not been constructed in accordance with approved plan, that's when we would issue a letter of non-compliance. And in a situation where a property has not been constructed in accordance with the setbacks prescribed in the land use bylaw, but did comply with municipal regulations at the time of construction, that would be a letter of non-compliance. So the recommendations before you is that the Standing Committee of Council recommend Council approve the Certificate of Compliance policies and procedures. Any questions?
Any questions, Councillor Pell?
Thank you. I didn't see a fee schedule in this document. Do we charge residents for a compliance certificate?
Through the chair, those have already been established for a development fees and fine bylaw that was amended last year in April.
Okay, perfect, so I'll look that up. And then, subsequent. So if someone is issued a letter of non-conformance, so if they're issued that, does it mean that if they were to sell the property, a new property owner may either face fees or have to make changes to the property in order to bring that into compliance?
The issuance of a letter of non-compliance does not compel the current landowner or a subsequent landowner to bring the property into compliance. It just gives them that transparency on what they're purchasing. They can choose to go through the development permit process, even though there's an existing home, to allow for the home to stay where it is. And then they would see a certificate of compliance in the future.
And one more question. So if they were to have a letter of non-conformance, so their building or adjustment or whatever would be basically grandfathered in, or I'm assuming that's not, yeah, okay. Would they face any issues when they would go to get a revised RPR or a real property report?
If they made no changes to it, they would end up in the same situation and get a letter of non-compliance or non-conformance, whatever that is. If they came to the department to remedy it through the development permit process, and if they wanted to remedy it and deal with that permit process with 1 year of getting that letter of non-compliance, then we would issue a certificate of compliance without the fee within that 1 year that then authorizes it, for lack of better words.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments?
Just one comment then. When this, if this comes forward to council, which I'm assuming it will at some point, could we have that fee schedule just attached as well, so it's right there? Thanks.
Anybody else? If not, there is an administrative recommendation. Councillor Coulter.
I move that the Standing Committee of Council recommend Council approves the Certificate of Compliance policy and procedures.
Any debate on that motion? Not seeing any. All those in favor? That's carried unanimously. We have no action correspondence. And information 9.1, report for Committee Youth Action Coalition. Welcome, Manager Board.
Thank you, Your Worship, Deputy Mayor, members of council. I have some honored guests with me tonight. I have Louise Rellis with Alana and Corinne Hansen with Alberta Health Services. There was some interest that was raised with regards to this new initiative brought forward by, I think it was last summer after an interagency meeting. Louise brought forward the interest in if SCSS could be involved in bringing together some youth-serving agencies to discuss some of the significant concerns that she had seen brought up through her connections, working with vulnerable youth in the population, with the schools, with law enforcement, and some of those different agencies that she's involved with. Some of the things that were brought forward are vaping, substance use, bullying, conflict management, lack of respect for authority, racism, as we've seen some public facility usage concerns with vandalism and activities taking place there, and some rivalries that are sort of coming apparent between different age groups of youth. thankful for these great connections in the community, Crane Hansen was also brought into the conversation and introduced to me as being available and willing to support the initiative and lead sort of the discussions and having some experience doing community-led initiatives to see some change and some community systems change sort of stuff. So we've been really fortunate to have some support, not just from Corinne, but from NOAA. And I
As a mental health promotion facilitator, also working with AHS, a similar role to myself.
with a last name that I can never pronounce correctly, so Noah.
Yeah, you don't.
Noah is also exceptional and has been a part of this initiative as well. So in August, we had an initial meeting. We identified a large group of individuals, interested folks who work with youth and are frontline with youth serving agencies, which included a broad variety of both Crete Public Schools administration from the schools, there's school social workers, there's some interest at the division level as well. We have a variety of enforcement from our CMP members. Our staff sergeant has been involved in all of our communications, our school resource officer, as well as our local bylaw management and our local bylaw worker or officers. We've had representation at the table from St. Gregory the Great with our family school and counseling counselors, some teachers as well as administration there as well. Central Alberta Youth Unlimited, our mayor has been in participation several times. We have invited, I don't know if Alberta Health Services, our mental health, children's mental health therapist has ever joined us, but we definitely have AHS at the table.
They just haven't been able to attend because of workload.
And timelines, absolutely. And then we've also got our Family Resource Network as sort of the identified original group. And one of the things that we have done every time, we've had 3 meetings so far, has invited folks, if they are aware of other youth serving agencies that work with youth in Blackfalds, to invite them, let them know that this is taking place. And we've had 3 meetings and we have seen a variety of folks join, as well as Corinne mentioned, workloads are a very real thing, as we're all aware, and sometimes the meetings fall on dates that we're not available to attend. So we've seen substitution, representation, or people haven't been able to return. Some new agencies that we have seen have been the Victim Services and Central Alberta Child Advocacy Centre, and Shining Mountains Community Services works with Métis and Aboriginal populations, and they're based out of Red Deer. 2 staff members do live in Blackfalds and frequently participate in our bi-monthly interagency meetings as well, and are quite connected in the community. So far, our discussions have included who the agencies are in the community that serve youth, what do they offer the youth in the community, what concerns are being witnessed in the community, and what might be missing. What do we see as the gaps? And we started back in September. So we've had 2 meetings where we're building a community asset inventory to look at what programming is universal and who is it offered by, what programming is targeted, who is it offered by, and what programming is intensive and who is it offered by. So some examples of those 3 different categories. A universal program that we think about FCSS type driven program would be BYC. It's a youth barrier-free program that youth between certain ages are welcome to attend. Targeted program would be, say, Babysitters Course, so it's a very specific program for specific age with specific outcomes. And an intensive program is not something that we see at an FCSS level. It is something that would be specific to maybe mandated parenting courses, or if child protective services was involved with the family, if they chose to get them involved in certain programs, potentially Big Brothers, Big Sisters, mentoring, those sorts of things. Intensive could also look like counseling, those sorts of things. So that's a bit of an example. So do you have anything you'd like to add? I've come to the end of my conversation. Or do we just want to open the floor?
The Youth Coalition came from a case conferencing with the school resource officer on the junior campus. And in that conversation, it was the junior campus administration asked about a youth coalition in the community seeing such an increase in adverse negative behaviour within the school population amongst peers. In neighbouring communities and high schools, so the largest population of youth in those schools with negative adverse behaviours were Blackfalds youth. So it was with that it came from the coalition. Could we bring those community organizations together to see how can we get ahead of these negative behaviors in our community before we open up a high school and add more kids to the community. So that was the footwork of the coalition, and it is growing steadily, quite steadily and rapidly.
I think the biggest thing I'd like to point out with this is a facilitated process we're using. It's based on collective impact. So trying to maximize what we have available in the community to do the best good. Trying to identify where there's possible duplication of services or where there's gaps. We don't want to come in and say, thou shalt do this. This is what's going to fix your community. All of the solutions that are going to come from this committee will come from the grassroots within Blackfalds. Now, what makes that difficult is it's a bit slower process. We're committed to asking the community and the youth, what is it that you need? What will help to make the difference? What will make you proud of being in your community? What will make you participate in your community? What drives you? And that does take time. So unfortunately, we haven't moved really quickly forward in a lot of ways. We're trying to lay a bunch of groundwork, doing some societal change, like trying to make sure that the youth and the kids and their families all feel like they're valued, like they're part of the community, and that they're part of the solution. It is a process I've used in a lot of other communities. Blackfalds is moving through this very well. It's amazing to me the will that I'm seeing for people to work together and to try and move forward. On our last session, we actually did start doing some strategic planning. We have goals set now, and it's just in its infancy in the strategic plans. But if you're interested, I do have a list of the goals that the committee is reaching now and where we're going to go. So I'll get the papers to hand you that. And I think that's about all I wanted to add, but absolutely, if there's questions.
I do have a copy of them here, so I can.
Do you?
Yeah, I
I've
can.
got several printed
Well,
out.
I can just say what they are
Yeah,
while we get that figured out. So our visionary goal statement so far has been youth-centered proactive engagement to build a positive sense of community. And the three main goals and the sub-goals that have been identified are, number one, providing parents with supports and connections to strengthen their parenting skills and abilities, which includes access to parenting supports and programming, parental support group for connection, network, and education. Number two, youth in Blackfalds will actively participate as community leaders by the fall of 2024. So what we'll see there, youth will have the opportunity to provide valued input about what they need in community programs and services, opportunities made available for youth to become leaders and develop leadership, and a youth facility / hub. Need is not confirmed as of yet, as we don't have youth input quite yet. And then number three, barrier-free easy access to mental health and substance use programming and education. So that looks like synergizing collective action by agencies, collaboration and coordination of agencies, reducing stigma and addiction supports in the school. So we do have intention, we've had some conversations, our next meeting is scheduled for January 25th, and we will be discussing terms of reference, sort of broad strokes for what the hope is of this community-based coalition to support the youth in the community. Do you have any questions that we might be able to answer for you?
Thanks so much for all the great information. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Councillor Dennis.
I think it's great to see this resource. It's awesome. Thank you so much.
Councillor Coulter.
I 100% agree with Councillor Dennis. You guys have done a wonderful job. It was a wonderful presentation. And just kind of curious on, is there any guidelines on people joining up with you guys to help sort of work on this, or?
So currently what we have seen so far is folks working in youth serving agencies that I do know we've had some conversation in that Blackfalds is very unique in that we have such a strength in municipal support so far, having LCSS at the table, council representation, having bylaw, and a real commitment is being shown around the table, which I think is sort of normal for us, but apparently not so normal for other communities.
It's very unique in my experience.
Mayor Hooper.
Yeah, more a comment, just having taken part in these are really up until this point, more facilitated workshop. And as it's grown, even breaking into groups, I find the diversity of the people in the groups actually adds a lot of value added. So if it were up to me, I would suggest that anyone that wants to take part in this, that has an interest, and I don't think you necessarily have to have a particular knowledge. It does help, but I think it helps in the group when someone has an outside perspective, because some of the people that come and sit in there are very specific. The bylaw officers, the RCMP, the teachers, they're very narrow in their perspective and what they see. And the little bit of information or questions that are injected are helpful. So if it were my perspective, I would suggest anyone that is interested in coming and taking part, there would be nothing but value added to the group.
I would like to address that as well. One of the steps with this type of work is that we do want to involve the community. The people that are actually being affected by this do need to have a voice in what the solutions are going to be. To that end, we may be doing some community engagement strategies, whether it's focus groups with specific groups of individuals that are being affected, or certain groups that may not want to be in the large setting. Another way that we're looking at is actually using the social needs assessment to inform some of the work that we're looking at. The avenues are broad. And one of the other things that we are talking about is actually working directly in schools with youth and trying to get them into more of a leadership capacity, possibly even seeing some of them joining or advising the council or the coalition as we move forward. So that's sort of the hope, is that this is going to be a place where people can bring their concerns and their ideas, and it doesn't matter who it is within the community that does that. And their input will be respected and included.
One of the conversations that came up at our last meeting, specifically from the junior campus, when we were discussing the opening of high school and what that would look like in the community, what it might physically actually look like. They estimate about 100 students per year. So we will have an influx of 100 grade 10 students, 100 grade 11 students, and 100 grade 12 students into this community that we don't normally see. Now, we're all aware of the infrastructure and the roads and the stores and what's available in that space. Granted, some of these students will likely have their own transportation, so that will have some implications around the community, not specific to the area. But if we think of, if you've ever been at the Abbey Center as schools letting out, you know what that looks like, and that is only a school of half that. So we will be doubling the number of bodies and administration and teachers and those things that will be in the space and in the area. So being able to do some proactive work to try and build some social infrastructure surrounding potentially community pride and civic engagement and involvement could be really advantageous to just simply the number of folks that are in the area and how they feel and do they care about their community, and what that could look like in time. That it's going to be a tremendous impact just in the population using the area, regardless as to their attitudes, their behaviors, and those sorts of things.
Councillor Pell?
Thank you. So just one question. I see here in the notes that that this to date the discussions have been led by AHS, which is awesome because we love having help in our community. Facilitated, sorry. So my question is, are we looking at having this created as is this going to become a town board, or is it going to be similar to the interagency meetings where it's completely separate?
I think that's I don't know what it could become if we had a bunch of youth that decided that they would like a youth council. We've seen youth councils in other communities. It is a thing. So far, this has been community-led strongly, with XCSS supporting facility and booking and sending out meeting invites. I don't know where that could go.
That's a good, that's a good question and a good idea for direction, touching on just in the social engagement, influx of more bodies to that area. And what do we want for Blackfalds? Do we want our youth more involved? And if we want that projection and that path, well then, yeah, youth council making this like I'm not sure whether it's a town board, but definitely the conversations of what's the direction we want for these youth, and what we want to see in a few years for that when the high school is open, and the voices that we want at that table. Again, bringing them into other town boards where there's a lack of youth involvement. Perhaps if we get them in on this, that might transfer us out to other town boards, and we could see just more fruition from it moving forward.
The way that this plays out in the community is very unique to that community. If that's the direction, if council is open to that, if the different board structures are open to that, then absolutely we can move that direction.
I have a question for you girls too. I know St. Greg's has a youth student council. I don't know if Iron Ridge Junior Campus does, but I'm wondering if it would be beneficial to bring them to one of your meetings just so they can sit in, because they might have other ideas from the student perspective on what your coalition might do for them as well.
Absolutely, that is something that has to inform the part. In fact, at this point, we're discussing halting, moving forward, and deciding what we need to do for youth, and concentrating on our other two areas right now, because we need that input from the youth as to what they want to see happen. There are other avenues that we can pursue right now until we are able to open that up for them a little bit. And we've actually been discussing with Sierra, who is our youth facilitator. Youth programmer, yeah. She's actually coming up with some strategies on how to make those connections with youth and get them either to the table or to have their youth shares.
That's great.
Yeah, we want them.
Yeah, just a little bit of more feedback to Councillor Appel's question. It doesn't feel like a town board. It doesn't function so far like a town board. If I were to say what my vision, or maybe not vision, but what assumption of where it would go is maybe a society at some point where it's community driven, because and as Manager Bourne has indicated, FTSS is supporting it just in terms of sending out invites and being a central point, but not leading it in any way. And I really think that it should be community driven, and it's been discussed at every single meeting at this point is when and at what point are we going to involve the youth, because they're the ones that this is ultimately for, and we want to understand what their needs are. It seems to be, and I think because it's in parallel to that social needs assessment, it feels like it was part of that process and it probably fed into it a little bit, but I think ultimately this is a community organization. I don't know that it would function as well as a town board.
In my viewpoint, it could advise some of what's happening for town council or for the administration, but the overall situation should be based in the community. The overall need and guidance for us.
Councillor Stanley.
Thank you. So I believe that what Councillor Appel was alluding to is a conversation that this council has had before, just when initially information of this committee or board or whatever we're going to call it in the end came forward, was that historically anything that has had council involvement, whether it be an internal board or an external board or committee, council generally has elected one or two members based off of whatever the bylaw of that board or committee has been. So the conversation around this table has been, well, if that's what we've historically done, is that what we should continue to do with this board? Because I think that there were potentially some individuals who wanted to be involved who felt that they were not invited to the table. And I could be wrong, but that was what I got from the conversations of council. So that might be a discussion for administration to see whether or not that's something that the board is interested in moving forward. But if it's something that we're looking at long-term as an outside appointment, we know that councils change from year to year, every 4 years. So that might be something that we need to consider.
I'm not sure if it helps, but at this point, the definition of what we're doing is a coalition. That is calling a collective impact. So I don't know if that helps you in deciding who should be involved.
It has been very fluid so far.
Exactly.
I don't see any reason that there would be. We have put the call out every meeting. If anyone is aware of other agencies that they know that are doing work in the community that would have an interest or value add to us, we would love to have them. As mentioned, it is a community initiative. We are unique. One of the things that we like to do is compare ourselves to others, and I think we're a little incomparable. We are a young, growing community that is feeling strange stresses that maybe you don't see in other communities that grow as quickly. Maybe it's our geography, maybe it's our demographics. It's hard to say. So what it ends up looking like, we're really hopeful that we can, maybe capture isn't the right word, but maybe we can entice some of our young people that are currently involved and active in the community and in their school communities in a way that will empower them to stay involved and stay active and stay engaged with the community, even though we will potentially lose them to another school outside of the community for several years. We know that our school community is not going to stop at high school. We have Red Deer Catholic only goes to grade 9. Our community is not going to stop growing. We're aware of that through what we've seen in the last several years. So high school for the Catholic school is not something that is not possible. So I mean, what the kids want to bring to the table, what we can get from our youth, what kind of engagement we get from our youth. We have all sorts of good ideas all the time about how we think we could solve problems, but we know for 100% certainty that we cannot tell our youth what they need to do. We need them to tell us what they need us to do to support them for what their success is going to look like. So we're going to see that in the next couple of months, I imagine, as we move through this facilitated process. There's tremendous engagement and buy-in around the table. I've never seen all of the school administrators in the same place at the same time.
Before most meetings.
And then, yeah, they kept coming back.
3 meetings in a row, they all come back.
And it is with the intention of initially was to capture the high risk and the youth who are repeatedly, maybe with bylaw, repeatedly suspended, maybe the Abbey Centre of Vandalism suffer discussion too. So it's the youth who don't attend the programs that are here, the youth that don't see themselves in what's here in the community, capturing them, capturing those who are not answering the surveys that we have given them because the questions don't match their lived experiences, the traumas that they have to go home to every day. So it's capturing those who feel that there's no place for them in the community.
The other part that I would point out with this is that this is really civilian. At the bottom of it, this is where your future counselors are coming from. This is going to be where your future people that move the community forward. An example I can give you, I worked with a group of students in Delbert when we were between grades 3 and 6. And one of their big projects was that they wanted to get new playground equipment. How many kids that age don't? But this group actually stuck together and kept working at it, using similar types of processes, using their strength to move forward. And they managed to get that playground equipment into place for that community when they were in grade 11. Long after they were off the playground, but they were the ones that were out there building it. They were the ones that were out there deciding what needed to happen. They were talking to the younger kids, getting them excited about it. Same thing about the skate park out there. What I'm seeing with that group of young people now is that's the community coaches. That's the people that are bringing businesses back into the community. They're going on to council. They've gone on to Red Deer County Council. They've done a lot of activism, for lack of better words. So watching that particular group, it was about 30 students. And I can see where they've gone now and where they've moved forward. So offering those opportunities to kids, and some of them were marching arts kids. Some of them were kids that had really great families, but they were so busy they didn't have time to spend with them. And seeing that growth in them over that course of time, it takes 20 years before a lot of this stuff is really apparent. And that's what we're doing right now, is looking at building that top citizenry as you move forward. So societal change takes forever. But that's why you guys are here. Somebody gave you those opportunities and those skills and those beliefs. So, just for what it's worth.
Councillor Thompson. Anybody else? Comments, questions? Children. Well, thank you very much, ladies. That was great. Thank you. Good information. And one more information item we have, Councillor Sandy, the Cody Dennis Memorial.
I will defer to administration as I'm just asking for an update on it so that our residents and the family members who are affected have an idea of where we're standing.
Sure, we can provide a bit of an overview. The council's aware the existing goalie sign was taken off the south side of Arena 2 back in spring of 2020 to facilitate the addition of the secondary service and the library. Right now, it is in storage. I did take a look at it here recently. The structure, it's about 16 feet in diameter, and the outside ring is made of 4x4 iron. And then attached to that is a mesh, and the goalie figurine is attached to the mesh. So it's a very heavy structure. I don't know what was used to take it down, but you would need a crane to put it up. It's in very poor condition. In fact, when it was mounted on the wall, there was a lot of rust bleeding out from the steel. So, I mean, it's been there for almost 20 years. It needs refurbishment. So right now what we're doing is looking at what is required for refurbishment, including what those costs were. One of the thoughts of having the goalie figurine reinstalled in Arena 2 on the wall behind the bleachers, and not including the ring, but just having the figurine itself. It is about, I think it's 12 feet by 10 feet, so it fit in the space, and that was the photo that was sent to council. And so our plan is to bring it to the upcoming rec board with this information. Also, right now we're looking back to see what there was, gathering background on the original installation, looking through the minutes of council and the rec board. We can actually speak to Councillor Dennis as well, so you'll have some information there. And we're also just reviewing the existing memorial items that already exist in the lobby of the arena, and providing that information to the rec board and then come to council.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Is there any comments on that information item? If not, I just need a motion to accept the information items for information. Mayor Hoover,
Move that council accept information items as information.
any debate or discussion? All those in favor? That's carried unanimously. And then we still have 10.1, the Abbey vandalism discussion. So we're on to the discussion.
So this had actually come forward at rec board meeting not too long ago. Director Kreckelwich might be able to speak to the conversation a little bit as well. Carol Simpson had spoken to rec board about multiple incidences of vandalism by youth who attend the junior campus. They go over to the Abbey Centre on their lunch breaks or in between classes or after classes. And there is a lot of damage that has been done, including to art installations that residents have donated money for that have not been able to be on display because they continue repeatedly to be vandalized. So the discussion at rec board was that maybe potentially we need to have a conversation with the school principal. It is a new principal who just started this year. Some of the conversation that rec board had surrounding that was potentially looking at the junior campus a few years back, prior to the principal directly before this one, did not allow any of their students to leave on lunch breaks. They didn't allow them to leave at all during the day. When they were in school, they were on campus. So that was a discussion point, was maybe asking them to go back to that to prevent some of the vandalism. Another conversation piece was potentially letting the school know if it continues to happen, they will be required to pay for the damage. Or concurrently, if their students are going to be over there at lunchtime, they need to have a teacher over there as well, so that they are watching the students. So these were just some of the things that Rec Board had brought forward and wanted the input of council. What do we do? Because it's directly impacting the staff. They're having to monitor the space constantly. They've had to have a CPO over there who frequently comes over on lunch breaks to monitor these students when they do have other things they could be doing. So do you have anything to add? Did I get it all?
Yeah, actually you did really good.
Yay.
The one thing I can update you all on is that we do have a meeting with them tomorrow at 2:30. So we're meeting with the principal and the assistant principal, and we're meeting with our peace officers and our school resource officer and myself and Carol. So the intention actually from the last meeting, what we interpreted was that we would meet first and then report to you guys at the 24th meeting, or the 24th meeting. So that's why it wasn't on this agenda. But, so that's our intention, is to meet with them first, discuss the things like Councillor Stendy mentioned, and see if we can come to some sort of a solution or try to at least curb this, right, as best as we can.
Great. I don't know if anybody else has any suggestions or anything they want to pass along to.
Yeah, I think along with that, there have been discussions at the policing committee meeting, not specifically about that, well, not just that, but really vandalism in general. And so I think I mentioned it at a previous meeting that there will be a subtab, crime prevention through environmental design evaluation done by Red Deer Polytech, which I'm sure that Director Rickolovich, when he meets with CPOs, will probably, there's at least I hope there's potential to discuss that as part of this evaluation too, because I would think that SEPTED would have some recommendations to potentially help curb that as well.
Any other comments or questions? And can we get a motion to accept that as a table discussion? Councillor Sands?
So moved.
I look forward to hearing what you guys come back with.
All those in favor? Carried unanimously. We have no adoption of the minutes, no notices of motion, any business for the good council? Not seeing any. So now we're just gonna go from our open meeting to our closed meeting. And we just want to thank everybody for joining us this evening, and we look forward to seeing you next week. And Councillor Coe.
Call for a 5-minute recess.